I'd like to begin by first thanking Terry Rubenstein for allowing me to be part of this wonderful project. She has pioneered this idea to give strength, encouragement to others, and it's an honor to be part of this project, and I hope the website, Finding Light Through Loss, will be a nechama, will be a comfort for her and her family, and an ilu neshama for her sister Shulamis Bas Ephraim Betzalel. And not only for her, but for whoever avails himself to this website, no doubt looking for words of encouragement in a time which is very difficult for them. Perhaps they've suffered their own personal bereavement, or they have close family members, friends in palliative care, whatever the situation may be. And particularly in the backdrop now when I'm recording, it's a time of an Eisar Yaakov. It's a difficult situation for the Jewish people as a whole. And please God, there should be much strength and chizuk and happier times ahead that comes out of this website and generally. Speaking about bereavement is very challenging because it's very personal, and no two people will experience it in the same way. Even two brothers, even members of the same family, will experience the loss of a parent or whoever it may be in a different way, and there are lots of reasons for that. A lot depends on the relationship a person had with the departed. A lot depends on the dynamics of the family, the friends, and the situation of the death, and so many other factors. And therefore it's very personal, and the best I can do is share my own personal experiences. And I'm not a communal Rav. I'm a menahel of a high school, has been in high school here in London, and therefore over many years I've had the opportunity to speak to students, to members of staff, and I suppose life experience gives you some backdrop about what words will help, and some ideas and some thoughts that I'd like to share with you. A few months ago, a member of staff came into my office, and they had suffered a bereavement of a close family member under very tragic circumstances. And we spoke for a while, and I shared with them some of my own personal thoughts about the bereavement when I lost my father just over 5 years ago. And we discussed how she was feeling and what we could do, how we can help. And let me share some ideas that I shared with her that I think resonated and landed well, and perhaps eased her plight in this very difficult time. Well, one of the difficulties with bereavement is that sense of loss and the lack of the loss of connection with a close family member. You're never going to see them again. You're never going to talk to them again. How do you deal with that? Of course, believing Jews understand that there are two worlds. There is this world and there is the world to come. And whilst that person is no longer in this world, they are in the world to come. The lack of ability to connect to them is still very challenging. And I shared with this colleague of mine the following idea I once heard from Rav Palm, a very beautiful idea which I think, for me personally, talks to me in a very profound way. Rav Avram Palm was the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah V'das, one of the beloved personalities in the Jewish world at the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century. And he, although he was born in America, he was sent off as a young child to Eastern Europe, to pre-war Europe, to some of the great yeshivas to study there as a child. And I think he was age 12 and he came back age 19. So he was there for a period of 7 years during his formative years. And it was very difficult for him to be away from his family at such a young age. And he described his experiences being on the other end of the world at that young age. And he said that his parents would often write letters to him. And he described when he received a letter, in those days sending letters, it wasn't like today. Nowadays you mention that in school, kids don't even know what letters are, let alone writing letters. It's a new concept. But when he received that letter in a very primitive form of postal system, and he felt the connection with his family, it was such a tremendous joy, and it gave him so much simcha, so much happiness. And then once in a while, the parents would find someone who was traveling to Eastern Europe, and they were willing to take a package for the Avram Palm's parents. and they would put together something, some dried fruits, photographs, a letter, whatever, piece of clothing maybe, whatever it may be. And the simcha, the happiness that he received, that he experienced when he received this package from his parents, he said it was just indescribable. And Rav Palm sort of reflected on that. And he said that in later life, when he was saying Kaddish for his parents, he said saying Kaddish itself, saying the words Yiskadal v'Yiskadash Meirabo, is like sending a letter to the parents. The simcha it generates in Shamayim, the happiness that is received on high from the soul of the departed, is akin to what he felt when he received the letter from his parents when he was in yeshiva. And when he received that package, that simcha, was akin to when a child, or whoever, does maisim tovim, does good deeds, learns Torah, says Tehillim, whatever it may be, in the merit of that deceased person, the simcha, the happiness that that departed soul experiences because of the good deeds, the Torah learning, the chesed, whatever it may be, the acts of kindness that are done in memory of that person, the soul receives so much simcha, so much joy, that is almost indescribable. And for me, that's a very powerful idea, because of course, halacha, Jewish law, prescribes what we do and what we don't do. So a child will say Kaddish, and that is a form of connection. Some children find that difficult, some children find that comforting. Again, it's a very personal experience. But the concept of doing something, the ilu nishmas, to elevate the soul, to connect to the soul of the departed, is a very powerful tool. And therefore, I undertook, after my father passed away, to learn a Mishnah or two a day. Mishnah is the standard thing one learns in memory of a departed soul. The words Mishnah is made up of the letters Mem, Shin, Nun, Hey, and which spells the letter Neshama, and therefore that's the natural choice of study, to learn in memory of a departed person. And therefore I chose to learn a chapter of Mishnayos a week, a Mishnah or two a day, and I did that. I started with Seder Moed, and aside from the fact that I knew that my father's neshama was benefiting from it, the simcha, like I just described, that Rav Palm experienced when he was a young boy and received that package, it gave me great comfort to know that my father would receive that simcha, that happiness, that comfort, that joy of his daily package, as it were, learning a Mishnah or two every single morning. And aside from the comfort that it gave me, that it would generate simcha for my father, I think it also maintained the connection. It maintained the connection in a very sort of productive, healthy way. And that's important as well, because bereavement, part of the loss is just experiencing the lack of connection, and therefore having a fixed time, which for me was learning a Mishnah or two a day, over and above everything else, and the thoughts and the memories and the conversations you have with other people, family, non-family. That was for me a very meaningful thing. So I shared this with my colleague, and I liked the idea. Mishnah wasn't her thing, and it can be anything really. It doesn't have to be Torah learning. It can be a chesed project. It can be acts of kindness. It can be whatever it may be. It's very personal, and whatever talks to you, and whatever perhaps has meaning and relevance for the person who's departed. This particular individual learned a Mishnah or so a day of Pirkei Avos. She had a particular book that I recommended to her, and she enjoyed doing it. And again, she felt the connection, she felt the satisfaction that it was benefiting the person who had passed away, and made a siyum at the end, and it gave her some focus, some sort of positive outlet as to how to deal with this very difficult bereavement. Other things to think about is that believing Jews are guided very much by halacha, and halacha, Jewish law, prescribes our course of conduct, and we are so fortunate that we have a framework with which to follow. I remember one time meeting someone who had it was a non-Jewish person who had just suffered a bereavement, and he was back in work the next day. He chose not to take the whatever days off that he was entitled to, and he came into work the next day, and I just felt that he was lost. He was lost. He didn't have a framework to channel his emotions. And halacha is we're so fortunate to have halacha to do this. From the moment a person is even before the person has passed away, there are halachas which guide us to how we deal with the situation, and certainly after the death, the period leading up to the burial, post the burial, the week of the Shiva, divided into the beginning part and sort of a later part, and then the Shloshim, and then beyond for a parent, the year of Avelus. And that guides a person how to deal with things. The Shiva itself, people I'm sure have different experiences of the Shiva, but I personally found it very comforting. It was, Baruch Hashem, my father was a very wonderful person, and people had very happy, fond memories of him. And therefore, having the vehicle of halacha to express your emotion and to sort of guide you through the whole process, Chazal, our sages, knew exactly what they were doing. And they sort of gently guide you, hold your hand through the whole process. And I found that itself a very comforting thought. I think also that helps a person not mourn excessively. There is a danger, there is a tendency perhaps to do that, and that is not always a productive way of dealing with it. Again, it's difficult, but if one keeps to halacha, if one keeps to Jewish law, that gives you a barometer, a measure of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And excessive mourning, aside from it being almost counterproductive and somewhat unhealthy, but it's actually damaging to the soul of the person who's departed. The Gemara talks of situations where the soul has departed, is troubled by the fact that the family he's left behind may be mourning excessively. And that's not considered a positive thing in Jewish thought. There is a beautiful phrase in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says something which I found very powerful. This is in the very last sif in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, in the laws of Kibbud Av V'Eim, in Siman Kuf Mem Gimel. He says the following: Mi shehu rotze be'emes lechabed es aviv es imo. Someone who genuinely wants to honor his parents, yasok b'Torah v'masim tovim. If he lives a life of Torah and mitzvahs, productive, meaningful Jewish life, shezehu hakovod hagodel ha'ovos. That is the greatest honor one can give to parents. She'omrim habrios, because people will say about that person, Ashrei la'ov ve'eim shegidlu ben kazeh. Happy are the parents who have given birth to this child. And that, I think, is a very powerful idea, because it's not limited to the lifetime of the parents. If a person, like I said before, does acts not only in memory of, but just behaves in an upright and honest and meaningful, productive, inspired, dignified way, then that itself is a source of comfort to the parents. That is actually keeping Kibbud Av V'Eim. And people will say about this child, Ashrei la'ov v'eim shegidlu ben kazeh. Happy are the parents who have raised such a child. So behaving in that way also connects you to the parents or to whoever it is that has departed. And I think that's also a powerful idea. I want to share with you one final thought. And again, this is personal, and for some people this will resonate and for some it won't, but I think it's important to share it. Many months, 4 or 5 months after my father passed away, I had a dream. And my father came to me in a dream. I remember it was sort of, he looked very well. And the way he looked on Erev Shabbos after he had got ready for Shabbos, dressed in his nice Shabbos clothes, he has just showered and his hair was brushed and he looked dapper, as he would say. And that itself was comforting, that he looked well. And I thought to myself in my dream, what a wonderful opportunity that I can speak to my father again. And we were having a conversation. I was thinking to myself, I shouldn't waste the opportunity. I should really think of things that I need to ask him that I won't ever get the opportunity again. And there was a family joke that we somehow were related to a very distant person. No one really knew how. So I thought to myself, perfect, that's a great opportunity. My father was a big family man. He loved mishpachology. And I said to him, tell me, Dad, how are we related to such and such a person? And he smiled and shrugged and says, not really sure. I think that was his response. But the point is this, that of all the questions I was sort of struggling to think of a question to ask him, when I was reflecting on this later, I realized that there wasn't much left unsaid in our relationship. We had, thank God, a good, healthy, positive relationship. And for me, that was itself a huge comfort. And therefore, I think whoever's listening to this, I understand that people have different relationships, and some relationships are more complicated than others. But if you're fortunate enough to be in a position where the person has not yet passed on, they are maybe receiving palliative care, or they may be receiving care where their communication is still possible. It's not too late to have conversations, to try and make good things that were covered up or weren't spoken about, or may help. And if ever there was a time, now's the time, done in a clever and a gentle way. And I think that itself will give much comfort and will help the whole process. For me itself, knowing that we had all the conversations, we had spoken, and not just in the last 5 minutes, but over a lifetime, that itself was a very powerful idea. So even if it's perhaps too late for the person who has passed away, I think in terms of other relationships with the next generation or other family members or friends, whoever it may be, to try and make sure that those relationships are as positive as they can be, things are not left unsaid, and to live a life which is noble and upright itself will give tremendous pleasure to those who have departed. I hope these words are of some benefit and of help, and my contact details will be on the website, and please do feel free to be in touch. I'm very happy to speak to anybody or to be of any further help, support to whoever needs it. Thank you.